Share your most mysterious stories related to the forest. In Yellowstone Park, I once decided to go on a solo hike. On the second day, after setting up my tent, I heard strange noises, as if someone was trying to mimic a human voice. It wasn't a wolf or a bear, but something that made almost intelligible sounds, though distorted. At first, I thought it was just an echo or some animal, but then I heard it repeating my words. "Where's the flashlight? Where's the knife?" Panic took over me. I grabbed my things, packed my backpack, and retreated to my car. I spent the night there, trembling at the thought that this creature might still be nearby. I've never gone on a solo hike again. We were driving along an abandoned road in Montana late at night. Suddenly, the headlights revealed a figure in the dark. A tall, unnaturally skinny person with arms that almost reached their knees. They stood completely still, staring directly at us. We drove past, but a few miles later they appeared again, this time standing closer to the center of the road, as if waiting for us. We decided to turn around, but as the headlights flickered for a brief moment, the figure was already standing behind the car, right by the trunk. We floored the gas pedal and didn't stop until we reached the nearest town. Since then, I can't shake the feeling that I sometimes see that silhouette in my rearview mirror when driving at night. Tell us about situations that traumatized you the most. VR is wild, man. But you've got to be careful. One time, I accidentally clicked on 4 women, or at least I thought that's what it said. Turns out it was actually for women. Next thing I know, I'm at knee level, and right in front of my face is some guy's python. I freaked out so hard I screamed, and that thing almost went straight into my mouth. Weirdest experience of my life. Technology, man, what can I say? If you think you've seen some crazy things in life, then you clearly weren't in the office with me on the day my colleague's chair broke. It all started when he tried to dramatically lean back while discussing some boring project. The next thing I remember is a loud crack, a scream, and, well, let's just say a very sudden and unfortunate meeting between his backside and the metal pole of the chair. We all froze in shock, not knowing whether to laugh or call an ambulance, while he tried to stand up proudly as if nothing had happened. Now every single time I sit down, I thoroughly inspect the chair first.
Hi guys, can you tell something about illegal border crossing? A few years ago, I found myself in a tough situation and had to cross the border illegally. It was a forest route, at night. The guide and I moved quietly, but my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it could be heard miles away. At one point, a searchlight was pointed at us, but we managed to hide in the bushes. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, the light moved away, and we were able to continue. To this day, I think back to that moment and wonder, how did I even go through with it? When I was a guide, something similar happened to me. It was a quiet night and the client was typical, scared and dragging a backpack like it was full of bricks. I told him right away, "Stay behind me, no noise." We were on the green route, a tried and true path. He was breathing like a steam engine, so I whispered, "Step lighter, keep quiet." Suddenly, a searchlight lit up. I shoved him into the bushes and said, "Don't breathe, or we're done." I hid behind a tree, listening. The light moved away and I whispered, "Let's go, but keep it steady." 30 minutes later, we were across the border. He was shaking and I joked, "Stress tax applies." For me, it was just another routine night. Reading stories like these, it's always the same. Someone panics, someone sneaks, and everyone thinks they got lucky. But you know what it's like on our end? Sleepless nights, combing through bushes like we're ghost hunters, knowing half the illegals think we're fools. We don't wave those searchlights around for fun. We're just trying to prevent trouble, for you and for us. You think it's just your life at stake? Meanwhile, we're the ones reporting every missed step, ramping up patrols, and going back to sweep the forest again. We're exhausted from chasing shadows. Next time, think about the fact that we're human too, and our nerves aren't made of steel.
What's the craziest thing you've ever done that you absolutely don't regret? I hate roller coasters, but once I was dared to ride one. On the first drop, I threw up. On myself. On the guy next to me. And even on the guy in front who spent the rest of the ride trying to figure out where it all came from. I thought the worst was over, but I was wrong. When the ride stopped, I took one look at the disaster around me and threw up again. This time, purely because of the aesthetics, OMG, you even topped me. Once, I decided to pull a prank at a party. I hid in the trunk of my friend's car to jump out and scare him when he went for beer. Turns out it wasn't his car. Some random guy drove off with me in the back. I spent 2 hours in the trunk listening to him on the phone, talking about his weird feeling of being watched. When he finally stopped at a gas station, I popped out and said, "Surprise." He nearly called the cops. Now he's my coworker. Who knew fate had such a sense of humor? Tell us about your scariest experiences with mystical incidents. A few years ago, I rented an apartment in an old house. In one of the rooms, there was a mirror in a heavy, ornate frame that I never touched because it looked like something out of a horror movie. At night, I often heard quiet footsteps in the hallway, but I thought it was the neighbors. One night, I woke up and noticed that the mirror had slightly opened, as if it were on hinges. But in the morning, when I checked, everything was locked, and there were no hinges. A few days later, I decided to move out. While taking out the last of my belongings, I glanced at the mirror and saw a dark silhouette deep inside it. I don't know what it was, but since then, I've avoided mirrors, especially at night. When I was doing my internship at an old psychiatric clinic, we were told about room number 12. No one had been admitted there for a long time, but patients claimed that at night, they could hear sounds coming from it, like someone tapping their fingers on the walls. One night, I stayed on duty. Hearing that same sound, I decided to investigate. The door was locked, but through a small gap in the window, I saw tiny pieces of plaster on the floor, as if someone really had been tapping the walls. I turned on the light, but the room was empty. The next morning, the head nurse said, "You heard it? The tapping always happens before someone leaves the clinic, forever." That day, no one was discharged, but a week later. What's the craziest thing you've done thinking it was a great idea? One day, I decided that getting a tattoo of my girlfriend's name after just a couple of months of dating was the ultimate romantic gesture. She said it would prove my love, and of course I fell for it. A few weeks later, she dumped me, and I was stuck with her name on my arm. I tried to get it covered up, but the tattoo artist laughed and said, "This is a warning for your next girlfriend." Now I've got a big black stripe on my arm, and everyone keeps asking where I got such a brilliant idea. When I was 22, I thought it was a genius idea to dive into online casinos. I was convinced I could double my savings in just a few hours and start living like a king. It started harmlessly. Small bets, a couple of wins, pure euphoria. But then I lost half my money and decided I'd win it all back. The result? I lost everything I'd saved over a year and even ended up borrowing money from friends. Now they call me the king of bets, and I'm still paying for that brilliant plan. Once I thought it would be brilliant to pretend to be an art expert at an exhibition to impress a girl. I strolled around confidently, saying things like, "This painting clearly represents the battle between light and darkness through the lens of expressionism." Everything was going perfectly until I started giving advice to other visitors. Turns out one of them was the exhibition curator. The result? My expert analysis became a running joke among the museum staff. And the girl? She left with the curator because apparently he humiliated me so elegantly.
Recently, I witnessed something paranormal. What terrifying stories have happened to you? At work, our printer seems to have a life of its own. It prints documents no one sent, sometimes at night. One time I tried talking to it. "Hey buddy, what do you need?" And it responded by spitting out 50 pages saying, "Connection error." Isn't that a ghost? Now I leave a cup of coffee next to it, just to keep it motivated. I'm afraid that one day it'll start printing my thoughts. This happened when I lived in an old house that used to belong to my grandmother. At night, I often heard footsteps in the hallway. At first, I thought it was just the floorboards creaking, but one day, the doors began opening on their own. I felt like my grandmother was trying to tell me something. I even tried talking to her, apologizing for not visiting her more often before she passed. The noises stopped after I moved her old armchair to another room, but the guilt stayed with me. I always thought ghost stories were just tales until I experienced one myself. A few years ago, my friends and I rented a house. One night, we noticed a light on in a room we definitely turned off. When we went in, there were chalk drawings on the floor that hadn't been there before. We brushed it off as a prank, but then strange things started happening. Items disappeared, doors slammed shut on their own. A couple of months later, one of us went missing. The police found no traces. To this day, I recall it as the scariest time of my life.
You can add 1 inch to anything. What would you change to create maximum chaos? I would add 1 inch to the corners of all bedside tables. At first, it seems like nothing has changed, but now every time someone stubs their pinky toe, it becomes an absolute curse. People start breaking toes en masse, hospitals are overwhelmed with queues, and doctors, who also have bedside tables at home, come to work with their own bandaged toes. Everyone is angry, irritated, and yelling at each other. Furniture manufacturers claim, "That's not our problem." And the world plunges into chaos, where everyone is terrified to enter their own bedroom. A true apocalypse of home interiors. Add 1 inch to the length of all condoms, and watch as the world of male egos collapses. Now every guy will nervously stand in the pharmacy thinking, Standard? What if that's not for me? Am I just barely making the cut? Pharmacies turn into mini therapy centers, with pharmacists offering counseling, and the phrase size doesn't matter becomes the most popular lie of the modern era. Mwahaha! Just 1 inch, and I would flip the world upside down. Add it to the diameter of rectal ultrasound devices, and suddenly millions would fear doctors more than any disease. Humanity's weakness lies in their fear of small changes they underestimate. But I see their true potential. Let this inch be the beginning of the end of their fragile illusion of comfort. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.